Good evening, and welcome everybody to tonight's program at the Commonwealth Club. It is quite an amazing building. It makes me regret that I haven't been here before until tonight, in fact. Um, as mentioned, I'm David Peskovitz. I'm a research director at Institute for the Future in Palo Alto, and I'm the co-editor of a website with some friends called Boing Boing, and co-founder of a record label called Ozma Records. Joining us this evening is one of my absolute best friends in the world, and that's Douglas Rushkoff, who's also actually a fellow at Institute for the Future. You're a professor of media theory and digital economics, and you've written a slew of books that are actually, they're all fantastic, and this is the latest one. It's called Team Human, and I think you'll have them around to sign for people afterwards. I met Doug for the first time, I think it was in 1994, very close to here, in sort of this techno bar on ambient music night, in the guts of an airplane that was inside the bar. And we were having a conversation about our shared influences and inspirations and Timothy Leary and many others. And it was the beginning of a long and lasting friendship that emerged out of the early cyberdelic culture of San Francisco that really spawned a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight, for better or for worse. So you study the breakdown of human connection, while innovations in markets, technology, and social institutions have promised to bring us closer together. The human connection has really suffered, something we've talked about a lot. So while it seems like the digital future is already here, in this book, and really in all your work, you argue that we have to bring the human spirit back. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Douglas Rushkoff to the Commonwealth Club. So Doug, I have to ask, what the hell happened? What went wrong?
There's so many ways. The moment that I knew something was going wrong was the day that Netscape, which was the browser based on Mozilla, a nonprofit browser, the day that Netscape went public. Because it was also the day that Jerry Garcia died. And I felt like, that was kind of my American Pie moment, that the values, the 1960s San Francisco values that I thought were being, retrieved and expressed through this new anything happens people's medium, this optimistic, if slightly utopian ideal of wiring up humanity as the neurons in the great Gaian global brain, having this almost test run for shared consciousness, the wild possibilities of a connected collective human imagination, and what that meant for evolution had been surrendered to market futures. That the internet became the poster child for the dying NASDAQ stock exchange. And instead of using technology to create a new future, we really started to look at how to enhance, how to grow the stock exchange, how to grow markets, but also we started to think much more in terms of predictability. If you go from being a future creator to a speculator, then what you really want is to increase the predictability of your bets. And the future became this thing that we place wagers on and try to increase its predictability. So where the internet used to foster or catalyze human weirdness, we have decided to use the internet to quell human weirdness, right? So we launch algorithms that are almost like demons. You know, they're designed to find our exploits and then leverage them to get us to act against our own better judgment and more consistently with our algorithmically derived consumer profiles. And I understand why. They don't want just 80% accuracy, that we're going to go on a diet or realize we're gay or whatever. They want 90% accuracy, and that means taking that 20% of people who are going to do the weird thing and getting them to conform. You know, and now we have a multi-trillion-dollar industry that is developing technologies that play humans instead of technologies for humans to play. So we've become the objects of technology rather than the subjects, the ground rather than the figure, you know, the medium rather than the message. And it's a profound and dispiriting and dehumanizing development, which has led us now to, rather than seek the other person through the net, we are trying to get away from the other people. We don't see other people as people. We're starting to see them increasingly as objects and as others. You know, and that's because we're living in a landscape that's really intentionally designed to do that.
Well, this is a very dramatic shift. You know, when I'm talking about 93 and Multimedia Gulch in San Francisco and young people doing creative things with technology and harnessing do-it-yourself media to generate your own media content and distribute it without the need for deep-pocketed middlemen, and you know, the intersection of psychedelic culture and music with, you know, computers and early video, that didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, the reality is that the digital age was spawned from you know, the counterculture.
Right, but the counterculture had some problems inherent to it. So the things that I'm talking about are not problems of digital. These are much, much older than digital. You could trace them back to the industrial age. You can trace them back to the invention of language, if you want, or invention of text. You can go all the way back. This is part of human nature. But in this last phase, part of the problem is that, bless everybody's hearts, but part of the problem is that the San Francisco, Esalen, West Coast style spiritual culture was too heavily steeped in Maslow and self-actualization. And self-actualization is an individual trip rather than a collective one. And it dovetailed so perfectly with self-interested, me-generation 1970s consumer capitalism that, and we hadn't distinguished between the two before we threw them online. So we ended up, thinking about this kind of pedal to the metal acceleration of my personal transformation, and you end up with this sort of, Peter Thiel, Steve Jobs, individual, Buddhist titan, vampire, or whatever. Partly it's because we were not actually rigorous about our spirituality before we embedded it in that infrastructure. And it's also, and it's fun because I trace it in the book. In the one sort of genuinely historical section of the book, I look at the two-track diplomacy effort that was done at Esalen. It was really interesting, where they wanted, it was during the end of the Cold War when the Soviet Union was still there, but starting to crumble. They set up some meetings between some prominent American, wonderfully weird scientists and spiritualists and the Russian counterparts. And the Russians who came, the Americans were people like John Lilly, weirdos. And the Russians who came were these people called cosmists. I don't know if you know about cosmism, but it's a branch of Russian Gnosticism that sort of spawned from the Russian Orthodoxy. And Russian Orthodoxy is an interesting kind of Christianity because it has a lot of personal salvation. You rise from the chrysalis of matter into pure consciousness. You can have personal, whatever that is, where you just kind of go up and out of body. And those cosmists were real hits with the Esalen people, because the cosmists were saying, look, we can take consciousness and put it in a robot, or we can have longevity and people can live forever. And that was so captivating to the spiritual culture. And those two kind of mimetic threads came together. And then that was sort of what infused even the good cyber world with these narratives of escape and not apocalypse, but you know what I mean? You'd go to a rave and we're going to touch the alien. We're going to get there. Tonight's the night. It's going to happen. It is going to happen. You know, that somehow these 1,000 people together dancing would, you know, and somehow just break through the strange attractor at the end of time.
You were there with me, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't,
Yeah.
don't act like you weren't with me.
But I did. But even then, with you, and I would, in my little baby talks, I was saying, I don't know about this sort of Terence McKenna, the bottleneck at the end of time, and only the people who've had the DMT experience are going to make it through to the next dimension. And I would say, look, George H. Bush better make it with us, because it's all or none. And he's like, no, Douglas, it's not going to be all. It will be some or none. You know, it's like, yeah.
But you know, I don't know what happened in the hot tubs at Esalen. I'll tell you that. But I will say that I'm not sure that, yes, there's Peter Thiel and these kinds of sort of this transhumanist, I'm going to have my colony on Mars, or in the ocean kind of mindset. But then, I don't see there's a different mindset, I feel like, that drives, the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Jack Dorseys of the
I don't know if they'd want to be in the same sentence with each other, even. But
probably not. Yeah. But I mean, my point is that I don't know that their mission is one of transhumanism
but
in
it's
the
all
same
the
kind
same
of way.
But it's all the same shape, right? We've gone from understanding reality as a circle to understanding it as a line. And if you look at the indigenous cultures, they all have reincarnation, and they all have the idea that there's really no such thing as human originality, that we're all just kind of recapitulating the actions of deities, And we didn't mean it this way, but the Judeo-Christian line, once we had text and we could have a history and we could have a future, we started to look at sort of a spiritual reality less as a circular thing, less as something where I can't be shitty to you in this life because I'm going to see you in the next one. Everything's going to come back around. We started to see it as a straight line. And we adopted almost like an automotive understanding where we can shoot our exhaust behind us as long as we're moving forward fast enough. And I feel like that's the Zuckerberg, Dorsey, Thiel problem. They think that and sometimes the well-meaning ones think it's okay. We can, Monsanto will teach us how to grow food on plastic, If we just got to keep going, but don't look back, right? Don't look back at the externalized cost of all what you're doing. And that's the same. I mean, both it's a linear spiritual trip, a linear capitalistic trip, a linear technological trip, rather than looking at, and that was that other book I did, Present Shock, at what's happening right now. And what I realized was that the problem is that we bought some industrial age and capitalist understandings of human value. We understand human beings in terms of our utility value. We no longer believe that we have intrinsic value. So these folks who are trying desperately to achieve something, it's because they feel worthless now. Now, I was lucky. I was raised with Mr. Rogers, and he told me I'm special just the way you are. And I believed that, and I still do. And that's human dignity. I don't have to have data that's worth anything, or money that's worth anything, or an achievement, or a job, or anything. I am sacred just the way I am. And if those folks believed that, they wouldn't be in this race to prove something. Mm-hmm. So I look at it almost, kind of psychologically, or as a psychospiritual problem of having lived in a culture that is running on an economic operating system that demands growth to stay still, And we've accepted that as a condition of nature. And the free market libertarians argue that it is nature, and it's not. So I'm arguing no. Read your Darwin. Look at evolution. Look at the history of matter and everything. Evolution is a team sport. It's not the survival of the fittest individual in competition with the others. It's the story of massive collaboration between species and within species. It's the secret life of trees. The big tree, I was taught the big tree shades the little tree and the little one dies, and whichever one reaches the light first wins. Turns out that's not true. The big tree is sharing nutrients through a network of mycelia under the in the soil, which turns out to be alive, not just dirt, to the smaller evergreen tree. And then the evergreen tree in the winter, it shares nutrients with the big tree, and that's how human beings work too. You know, we are not. If we are the most advanced species, it's not by virtue of our competitive superiority. It's by virtue of our collaborative superiority.
But yet the metaphor you use is team human. It's a sports metaphor which embodies a sense of competition.
Yeah, but it's play. In other words, that's the idea. If you want to compete, then it's play. Be your team. Okay, you're on this team. And what does Team Human want to do? Does it want to beat the other teams? Is that what we want? Okay, fine. But the only team I would really go against would be kind of like Team Algorithm or Team Anti-Human, you know? And I feel like that when we have a genuinely anti-human bias embedded in our digital infrastructure and in capitalism. The enemy to the growth of any business plan is how many people do you need in your company? Oh, then it won't scale. You've got people. Get rid of the people. They want healthcare. They want this. You know, the people, what's the problem with the predictability of your things? Oh, people are going to make choices. Well, then turn them into machines. Get them to behave more consistently. So humans are the
While
enemy.
giving them the illusion of choice.
Exactly. I mean, put them on E-Trade, right? Give them all these control boards so they feel like they're more in control. You know, the more control users have or think they have over their money, the more money they lose. The more they trade, the more they lose. Like, it's really funny. They want you to feel like you've got some big Bloomberg terminal thing, and you're, oh yeah, here I am. I got the information. I got a news feed. Now I really know what's happening. You know, and you know what's happening just as well as you know what was happening when the MAGA kid was staring down the Native American, and everyone's tweeting their outrage, and it's like, dude, you have no idea what's going on. You were not there. You were not there. And meanwhile, what was going on around you while you were tweeting and worrying about that? Stuff that you're missing. You know, and that's the game. That's the anti-human, dehumanizing game of these platforms.
So years ago, I used to sometimes call you the optimism engine.
I was thinking about that on the way here. Yeah.
And you had this way of when I was, you know, I would talk about something that would be, you know, I don't know what it would be, how all the cars on the road are causing a tremendous amount of pollution, causing problems. And you always said, no, actually, there's not enough cars on the road, because if we had more cars on the road, then everything would just grind to a halt, and we would realize this is a problem that we need to solve immediately. And so that was always
the counterintuitive Rushkoff flip.
The Rushkoff flip, yes, as we call it. We became the optimism engine, TM, to the Rushkoff flip. Are you optimistic still?
Yeah, I am optimistic that human beings have a strong possibility of surviving the next couple of centuries and even thriving. You know, and that today is optimism. I think we can make it. You know, and I am optimistic, and certainly from the events I'm doing, and I know it's a self-selecting crowd in some cases, but a lot of them are cynics in some of the places I'm going. And I'm optimistic that people have had enough, that people can't keep up with this thing anymore, that people are... I've got students who are already willing to spend up to 10 minutes a week just with other people. I mean, it sounds horrific, but it's better than none, right? They're willing to say, you know, 10 minutes a week, I'm going to take and just be with people without a medium. I'm going to put the phone down and just have this experience. And I'm not saying technology, that the idea is that the technologies are so bad and we should change the technology. I don't even want to focus on the technology. What I want to focus on, it's just like I'm not an allopathic doctor. I'm a homeopathic doctor, right? So I want to focus not on the disease, but on how do we strengthen our resiliency, our cultural immune response. response, what we used to talk about with viral media.
Right. So recently you and me and Jake Dunnigan at Institute for the Future wrote a paper called "The Biology of Disinformation," and Jake and I were surveying before you became involved in the project all of these sort of methods of weaponizing memes and media in various ways, and if you use this color, it's more persuasive than this color, and all these kinds of things. And then you came and really showed us, pointed the way toward this idea that these kinds of technologies that people are developing to, for one, to create this media, to weaponize media and weaponize memes and media viruses, and also to filter against them, technologies to defeat fake news, in many ways are a fool's errand,
Right. I mean, you become just part of this arms race.
And you came up, but you suggested that it was actually what we needed to do was focus on the human side and cultural inoculation, I think.
Right. Right. I mean, the problem is, the main critique of that perspective is that it's sort of putting the burden on the people, putting the burden on the consumer, and you can't do that. But who else do we have? You're going to put the burden on Sheryl Sandberg and Mark Zuckerberg? They're bad actors, right? It wasn't even an accident at this point. They're just bad. So no, and it's funny. I had a friend who was in a cult, and she realized it was a bad thing and came to me, and I tried to work with her to get her out of the cult. And she kept saying, but the guy's got these kind of magic powers, and he can be in my mind, and he can do this stuff. And she felt that he had done this wrong stuff to her, which made her be in the cult. And I had to explain to her, it's sort of the opposite almost of 12 steps. It's almost to say, no, let's look at the choices you made, the active choices you made to be there, to give her all the power for how that happened, so she could have all the power for choosing something different. And I realized that it could be looked at as blaming the victim. It's not in blaming the victim. It's empowering the human, because she's not the victim. She's a human. She had an experience. She did some things that she now onward, and it's the same with us. And, yes, Twitter and Facebook, and they're all doing mean things, and the initial impulse, and it's a great one, is sort of the humane technology movement. Let's go to these technology companies and get them to make technologies that treat human beings more humanely. Like cage-free chickens. Let's treat them more humanely on their way to the slaughter. And it's well-meaning. It's well-meaning. It's better than torturing the chickens on the way to the slaughter. And it's nicer to say, let's make technologies that treat people better. But I don't want to be treated by a technology. The object is not for us to treat people better as if we are the objects. It's for us to be able to choose more actively what we want to use and not. And so I'm trying to reverse the dynamic, right? We live in a world now where our technologies play us rather than us play them. Every time you touch your smartphone, it gets smarter about you and you get dumber about it. Right? So when we're playing people, when we've become the medium, when we've become the passive the thing that's acted upon, that's the wrong way to think about it. And even if we're the victim that's being acted upon unethically by Facebook, well, then go away from Facebook, then or at least be conscious. That's another way to say it. Be conscious when you use it. Understand, Timothy Leary again, he told us that the internet was as powerful as LSD. He said the internet is the new LSD. So America's been on LSD, living on a psychedelic substrate for the last 20 years with a terrible set and a terrible setting, and we're having a bad trip. Right? But what do? At first, the only good trip is a bad trip, right? Remember that one. That works when you're in trouble. But it should work for us now. So what has that brought us? It's brought us to the place where we realize, as anyone does on their deathbed almost, oh my God, all that matters is love. That's all that matters. It was the only thing that mattered is love, is the other people. So then we can say, oh, do I want to believe what Facebook and Trump and Twitter are telling me or whatever, that those people on the other side of the wall are Mexican rapists? That's the oldest trick in the book that kings use. Those are Frenchmen. Fuck them. Kill them. It's a fake national boundary. They made it up. There's no such thing as a nation. They made it up. Those lines aren't on the real map. They drew them. They're fake. I mean, the cities are kind of real, right? Those are sort of organic expressions, but the nations, they're not. So again, it's about who are we as people. And so all of the things I'm trying to encourage are people look in each other's eyes, establish rapport, spend time in real spaces with people. Let's turn classrooms, let's change education back to what it was supposed to be as an expression and celebration of human dignity. It was not meant to be an extension of work. It was compensation for a day of work. It was so that the coal miner could go home and read a book and experience the basic human dignity, not so that, IBM and Monsanto could go to the principal and say, teach the kids this because that's what we need from our workers. That's just externalizing job training to the public sector again. No. So it's all that, and it's super simple, and it doesn't scale immediately. It's going to be so local and so immediate, and it's going to seem so trivial compared to global events. But how do you stop climate change? By getting Trump to do something or our president? No, it's going to be cities. It's going to be local. It's going to be distributed solutions. So we kind of have to get used to it. And the other big argument against that is, there's no time. We're in crisis. There's no time. You got to breathe. You got to stop. You've got to pause. That's your anxiety talking. There is time to pause. There is time to sit and be. And you're not going to make any great choices. You can't respond, if you're not in a place of silence.
Well, I think that's it. The advice always is, respond, don't react. But yet, the technology that we're talking about drives you to react. It's all
what
about
it's for.
reaction.
That's what B.J. Fogg is teaching over in the behavioral labs at Stanford.
I don't know. I mean, I do think that there are some benefits of being able to
get people hooked on a technology?
No, but to be able to understand the choices you
Right.
make and what kind of impact those
Right.
choices you make, so you can adjust the knobs and make different choices to reach a desired goal.
Yeah, behavioral finance, non-weaponized, is interesting to see. I'll agree.
I mean, here's a question, and I'm going to try to get this because it's with a thick marker, so I can't read some of the words. It says, how do we build a better internet, especially social media, that doesn't simply exploit the growing field of neuroscience, speaking of BJ's work, to keep people, I think it says, tethered to their devices, so how do we do that? When they talk about consumer data with little or inadequate reward, or is conformity the reward of capitalism? So basically talking about, we're learning a lot about how the human brain operates, although we've only scratched the surface, and how do we use that knowledge in a way that doesn't amplify people's ability to control us?
Right. So we currently have a social media environment that encourages people to see other people as adversaries. That's what it's for. That's what it's optimized for. So what you would want to do is optimize the platform to help people see their adversaries as other people, as humans somehow. The odd thing about Facebook was, even though I never liked it because I thought MySpace was better than Facebook and I thought the web was better than MySpace, because I like quirky individualism rather than the increasingly cookie-cutter monolithic interfaces, Facebook wasn't truly terrible until they pivoted, right? Until it turned out that being a billion-dollar company wasn't enough and they had to try to become a trillion-dollar company. And that's when, instead of just running some ads, they became, the algorithmic hellhole because they had to grow. So the real way, it has to do almost more with the business model than anything, is try to do business in a way where your company's profits are the revenue. It's super old-fashioned, conservative, bizarre, counterintuitive. And I understand. And in Silicon Valley, what I'm talking about is called bootstrapping. And bootstrapping is from Baron von Munchausen. It's a magical thing. This guy, the idea that he could pick himself up by his own bootstraps. So it was so strange. But what it really is the way that real business works. You make some pizza. You figure out how much it costs you to make the pizza, including your labor. Then you charge a little bit more for it than it cost you. Then you take the extra money, you invest some of it in the business, and you keep some of it to eat and to feed your family. That would work. That would work. You could build digital companies the same way, especially a Facebook. You could build a Facebook for like what, $35 now? And then you'd grow, you put it on Amazon Cloud. I don't care. Give Bezos some money, whatever. But you could scale it at the rate at which it grows and be able to pay for it that way. So it's social media, I don't think, is intrinsically a problem. As long as you're not using it as a replacement for life and all that, it's great because grandma's in Florida and she wants to see pictures of the kids. And I mean, I don't have a problem with it. It's just when it becomes too hungry for human time and attention and data and has to be pivoted that way.
Well, I remember some of our early conversations when there were AOL, America Online chat rooms were like the big thing. And you had said, well, they're sort of training wheels for real relationships.
That's what I was hoping anyway. I know. People were talking in the early days that this stuff was going to desocialize us.
Yes.
And I said, look, television has already desocialized us. And the internet can be remedial help for a society that's already been desocialized through television, that you're all afraid of people so you can reach out and talk to someone, get some positive reinforcement in a chat room, and then maybe go out in the real world.
Right.
But that was a different internet. That was an internet where you actually went online, right? So you lived life in the real world. Going online was this thing. You'd plug in, it was a thing. You'd plug in your modem and go online and the whole thing. You would go and you would partly because it was expensive to be online, there was phone time and all that, you would download a conversation that was in progress, and then you would spend hours crafting a single paragraph for how you were going to participate, because there were famous people there. John Barlow and Nick Herbert and Howard Rheingold were going to be in that conversation, so you wanted to sound super smart, and you would craft this paragraph and then upload it. And the internet was a place where people sounded smarter than they did in real life. You can imagine. So that you would do that. And then, like the Well, which is one of the great bulletin boards, they'd have a party. And you'd almost be scared to go to the Well party because now they're going to see how I really am. I'm not that cool. I'm not that smart. I can't really talk like Christopher Hitchens or something. And but that's why I had this sense that it would resocialize us. You'd get enough positive feedback for your ideas, and then you'd go, okay, I'm proud enough of what I have to say that I've tried it out here, I can go be. And that's what people were experimenting with, sexuality and different role-playing and all sorts of stuff.
But now it's almost the opposite has happened, right? Where it's this sort, it's not really social media, it's anti-social media. And this, it amplifies our sort of sociopathic behavior.
It does. And you got to watch out. Every tweet could be the end of your career.
That's right. Well, that's also the other thing, is that this level of, but yet people aren't treating this media with the respect of something that has such permanence.
Right.
You
right.
know.
They don't, because the net seems so ethereal. It seems so temporary. But I mean, that's one of the great biases of the digital media environment. One of the great affordances of it is memory. It has perfect indelible memory. Everything is there. You can't retrieve it yourself, but it's all there. Everything, every email. It's like you've just been putting your whole life into one big text file, and it will be that easy to search before the end of this of this decade.
Whether you'll be able to search it or
or
the
just
company will is the big.
Or your adversary's lawyer. Or the Russians. The Russians. I love the Russians.
They won the Cold War after all, didn't they?
I guess so.
Yeah. So this book is a little different from, how many people have read any of Doug's previous books? Great. So a lot of people have, and which ones are my favorite. But this one is very different than any of them.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons it's different is because it's a manifesto, in 100 parts, little digestible chunks.
For the internet generation. A single toilet seating.
That would be the tweet length version. Why did you write a manifesto? And what makes this a manifesto?
It's a manifesto because I'm making an argument. Because it turns out that it's no longer a given that humans have intrinsic value. It's no longer someone has to argue for the humans, and I mean, I came up with the Team Human meme when I was on a panel with a famous transhumanist who was arguing that once the singularity comes, that human beings should accept that we've met our evolutionary successors, right? That computers are smarter than we are, that information has been trying to find more complex homes, and once technology is more complex than us, then we pass the evolutionary torch to the technology and then stick around as long as we're needed to keep the lights on for the computers. And after that, recede and accept our extinction. And I said, no, but humans are special. We're quirky. We're strange. We're wonderful. We can maintain ambiguity. We enjoy paradox. We can live in the liminal spaces between things. We don't have to resolve everything to a 1 or a 0. We can stay in between. We can watch a David Lynch movie, not understand what it means, and still find that pleasurable. That humans deserve a place in the digital future. And he said, oh, Rushkoff, you're just saying that because you're a human. Like it was hubris. And that's when I said, fine, guilty as charged. I'm on Team Human. And that's where the Team Human came in. It's like, all right, fine, I'm going to be on Team Human. And then after that is when I realized that the team is an important idea too, because humans are not individual species, that humans are a collective species. Humans are a collaborative species, that being human is a team sport. And so I kind of went on with that. But then I figured, and it took I wrote 2 or 3 books after that, still thinking about that. And because I really had to be able to articulate what is the difference between humans and zombies. In the zombie shows, you can't really tell. Everyone's looking at the horizon. There's the zombie on the horizon, and they zoom in on the person's face, and the person's thinking, what's the difference between me and a zombie, really? Right? He walks, I walk. He eats, I eat. He kills, I kill. Right? The difference is they're zombies, right? They're zombies. They're automatic. They're not conscious. They don't have choice. They don't talk to each other. They don't form rapport. They are zombies. And if we can't tell the difference between us and zombies, somebody needs to stand up and say, we are not zombies, right? We are not. We are humans. And it's okay for us to think of ourselves as central to our own story, because only if we rise as humans can we rise to the occasion of being the stewards of this planet, and to be the ones, yes, we're different. We're part of nature, but we're different from nature. We're part of nature because we're alive in nature, but we're different because we're conscious. But what does that mean? It means now it is incumbent upon us to make nature less cruel, to look at where it's being cruel and to try to mitigate those things. It's going to have problems. A tiger's going to kill the gazelle or whatever, but how do we make it a little bit more humane and human? And that should be our drive, not how do we separate ourselves from nature, or how do we achieve, individual salvation or transmutation or something.
Question again from the audience here, which is, this is a good one. What do you want leaders at tech firms to do? What can they do at this moment to be on Team Human?
It's really hard for them. It really is. If you read the Bible, there's this point when Pharaoh's done a couple of the plagues, and God says to Moses, I'm going to harden his heart. As if once you've acted inhuman enough, you kind of get morally or ethically brittle. It becomes really difficult. What they need is to as skillfully as possible turn their companies into worker-owned cooperatives, and the whole thing shifts. If the Uber drivers owned Uber, they wouldn't just be doing the R&D for their robot replacements, they'd be investing in their own and their kids' future. If the workers at Google were in charge of governing that company, they wouldn't be weaponizing search against humanity, You know, they wouldn't be turning. It's like, it's that easy. You know, it's that easy. Relinquish control, share ownership. Most of them don't have the power to do that.
That's right.
You know, is part of the problem. So
Because their job is to maximize shareholder value.
they see
not-
their job is to maximize shareholder value. You know, and it's actually a myth that these guys would get sued if they don't maximize shareholder value. CEOs are allowed to do a whole lot of other stuff. They're allowed to maximize the long-term impact of the company. Try to flip the company to a B Corp so it's a little bit easier to do that, or a multiple purpose corp. I mean, there's things they can do. Break up their companies. Try not to become holding companies. Try to change your shareholder communications. Go to Washington and try to flip the tax code so that dividends are taxed low and capital gains are taxed high. Then all of a sudden your shareholders are going to want earnings instead of growth, and then you can operate like a company again. And there's a lot of things they could do, but most of them just want to get the money and get out of there. Most of them are still thinking about their own bunkers. Most of them they feel like Thomas Jefferson described slavery. It's like having a wolf by the ears, you know, and they don't know how to let go. They're scared they're going to get bit right on the neck.
Here's another one in those lines. Are there any current scaling tech services, startups, or platforms or industry titans that you think are getting it right?
Scaling. I don't like scale, but I believe in sort of distributism and subsidiarity. Big networks of cottage industries, what would be called, anarcho-syndicalism is sort of the economic name for it.
Noted.
But yeah, someone told me I was an anarcho-syndicalist in some academic conference, so I was like, really? And I looked it up on Wikipedia, and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I kind of am. I buy that. So it's a good one, but the ones that are kind of doing it are Associated Press, Ace Hardware, Mondragon, the Inspiral people, and Lumio. They're kind of looking at other ways of defining what it means to scale, right? But the real way to scale is more as a club fungi than as a top-down corporation. It's easier to scale if you never go public.
Yeah, I mean, I like, as far as platforms, I mean, I like what Ev's doing with.
Oh, Medium. Yeah, it's an interesting one. So Medium's pivoted a whole bunch and tried a whole bunch of things.
I was there for it.
And I'm there in this pivot now. I'm writing. And this pivot is good. What he's really trying to do is to create a writer's commons, if you will. So people pay like $5 a month to have access to behind a paywall. Everybody can write and publish stuff behind the paywall, and then they divvy out the pot based on how many people read your story and how many people like applauded for your story and liked it, and how many minutes they spent actually reading it. So they're using all these different metrics. So it's not just sort of who clickbaited on your thing, to see a monkey getting killed by a cat or something, and rather, writing. And there's no advertising on it at all. So what he's trying to do is to figure out, is there a way to do professional writing in this environment? And and so far it's kind of working.
I think it's a righteous vision.
It is, and that's sort of centralized, but it's centralized in a different way. He's trying to distribute the value to people rather than extract the value from people.
Right. You can write for my platform, Huffington Post, for nothing, and
I'm going to sell it to AOL for $1 zillion and not even cut you in.
yes, I mean that's the opposite kind of approach.
It's a service. He's serving the writers. You know what I mean? We're not working. It's really weird. We're not working for Medium. Medium is trying to flip a model. This is a really tricky time for journalists. It's very hard. A lot of people don't even believe that journalists should be paid. I could write it. I could tweet it. Why? The reason we need paid journalists is so that someone goes on the ground and finds out what actually happened between the MAGA kid and the Native American. That's what journalism was for. So you don't have to just look at a picture from somewhere and try to, right now we're just competing to see who could put the best words on a picture. And whoever gets the catchiest meme gets to name that picture, right? These are rapists. No, they're immigrants. These are, MS-13 or whatever they are. No, it's called a child. Right.
It's interesting when you talk about pictures and looking at video, because I was thinking a lot recently about deep fakes, the ability to create these videos of people that are photorealistic, but they're saying things that they're not saying or doing things that they didn't actually do. And it's a really interesting tipping point because, for a long time, video has been sort of the last vestige of documentation of history that you could trust.
Right.
Because text, anybody can write text, and audio, well, you can cut it up and change it, and you hear different things, and interviews are edited. Or pictures, wow, we have Photoshop. Remember how that was, changed everything, and now we have it in video. And I don't know, what do you think? What becomes the media of record for history?
It's going to be based on the authority of the humans who are publishing it. It's back to, it's as reliable as text at this point, as any newspaper. In the old days, you could print a story and say, Billy the Kid just did this thing, and if it's an untrustworthy newspaper editor, then they might have just been making it up. And that is actually a good thing. Once this sort of ontological relativism reaches a peak, which is what it's doing now, once we realize that any video could just be reality TV edited to say whatever you want, we are finally media literate. This is this exercise I used to do with kids in like middle school. I would have them watch a news story and then give them the raw footage and say, now make your own story. And they'd realize, oh, I can make any story I want out of this footage. And they did too. So I'm actually entrusting the journalists to tell me the truth. And then reality TV comes along, which is basically about editing raw footage to tell a story that didn't really happen, and the interesting thing is that became reality. That became reality. The liberals...
It's amazing it's called reality TV.
Yeah. Yeah, and they buy it as reality, just like American Idol got bought as democracy. But it's weird. And the problem is, we liberals, we progressives, whatever we are, when George Bush was president, we retreated to fictional TV. We had The West Wing. My high school friend, Aaron Sorkin, wrote. We had The West Wing. It's like, oh my God, imagine if Martin Sheen was actually president and he thought about things, and it was. He's like a little like Morning Joe or something, but still, he was still cared about the issues, Or Murphy Brown, is that the way? Or where the right wing had reality TV. The right wing had The Apprentice. The right wing had, Jerry Springer and all that. And that's what kind of led to this, toxic masculinity, dark web insanity that we're seeing.
Yeah. It reminds me when you used to say that and I think about this a lot when we would watch the news, because that was what everyone did. Oh, time to turn off Star Trek because now the news is news time. Walter Cronkite, Lord, and at the end he would say, and that's the way it is, and we would believe him because he was the guy on TV.
Yep, he had that authority because we couldn't make TV ourselves, and whoever got on the tube, that magic tube, must have authority. But I remember when William Burroughs was starting to do Cut Up.
Yeah,
and he would. And this is back in the 50s, right? In the early 60s. Even then, he would cut up the front page of the New York Times, mix it all randomly, and say, now let's see what the paper really says, And so they were aware.
He said, when you cut into the present, the future bleeds out. Mm-hmm. So I always like that a lot. Yeah. Very interesting. Here's another one. I'm in civic tech and want to learn from a healthy balance of analog and digital to create, as a designer, a positive digital experience. Do you have any examples or inspiration of the balance between the analog and the digital?
Yeah, the whole trick with digital, and this is a hard one, is not to have a thing and try to figure out what can we do with this. You know, it's sort of the today's blockchain problem. Is a lot of people, the way they look at it is, oh, we've got blockchain. What's the application for this? You know, so it's a little cart before the horse. You know, rather, if you look at the community that you're working with, and civics really does happen. This is where Bannon's right. It's local, 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 local. You look at the community. What does this community need? So one example would be in a community that's fighting over something, and particularly a yes or no issue or something, and they're using almost the style of parliamentary debate and winners and losers to confront an important local issue or decision. You look at a technology like Lumio and what that's doing to try to help people reach consensus rather than a winner or loser type decision. And it's super simple. So the way that civic technology works is they took a real world practice, which was the General Assembly style of debate, or from, not even debate, of consensus building from Occupy. And it was, you know, with these various hand signals, if you agree, if you want to stop. And really what they were trying to do was just to make sure nobody was really, really, really pissed off about the decision, who really is going to be upset. So you start with that. Let's just try to make the decision in a way that doesn't freak out anybody. And you end up with very different kinds of collaborative outcomes. So what they did was they took this real world process and they created an analog for it online so that people could do it from further apart from each other, or so that you could orchestrate it with a couple of thousand people rather than just 20 people in a room. So that kind of example of civic tech works for me. The ones that don't is when you've got a thing and you go, oh, you know, homeless people could really use an app that lets them do this thing and that lets them find the resource that they need and da-da-da. And homeless people need a token. That's what the one guy, they need a token so they can have a durable identification. And he builds it and spends all this time and money, gets investment, and builds this thing, goes out to homeless people, and they're like, I don't want a token because I don't want to be this forever. I don't want people 2 years from now to know this was me. Stay away. And it's like they didn't even talk to the people. What do you need? You know, so it's not, you're not serving needs, you're just imposing your techno-solutionist.
That's the technology push versus
Right.
the technology pull. How can technology, I hear this question a lot, how can technology help society progress? Which is really the wrong question to be
Right,
asking.
and it's embedded. Why should society progress? And what is progress? What is progress? What is progress? Where did progress start? What was progress? Who invented progress? You know, kind of the Jews invented progress, you know, with linear time, you know, that we're going to get there. And we had a very good urge, tikkun olam, you know, heal the earth, make next year better than last year, next year in Jerusalem, the Messiah is going to come, Moshiach, yay, let's go, eyes on the prize, come on, or we've got to step on some people, but yeah, we're going to make it, it's going to be good, you know, progress. I don't want, right now, my current interest is not progress, you know, my current interest is nurture and connection and stuff. You know, you guys, I was so amazed at the number of homeless people in San Francisco. I mean, and I've tried to do the Rushkoff flip on it to say, well, it's because San Francisco's so accommodating and people are so nice here and they get good services and that's why they're gathering here. And what we really have to do is get the niceness that people have to homeless people elsewhere. But I might be, then there's this big building going up, this, what's that giant, what is that? Salesforce? Salesforce.com's got this giant building, and then the Uber driver said that, the Lyft driver actually, said that like it's like 90% empty, that building, or 70% empty or something. So then, why not take all the homeless people and put them in there if it's empty? But I don't know, it's too simple.
And why don't you have a bake sale instead of buying a aircraft carrier?
You would think, yeah.
You know,
They put up a parking lot, whatever that was.
yeah, that's a good song. Talking about localization, here's a question. My entire family and neighbor community uses Facebook services to communicate. How do we as a society get out of this network-affected lock-in system? Which I think it's a good question. I mean, I have no Facebook account. My mother-in-law was just visiting, and every morning, my stepfather-in-law doesn't go on Facebook. My mother-in-law reads to him, Oh, Tracy Evans, her daughter's graduating high school this week. Oh, Bill Murrow, yep, he's in the hospital for, whatever, a heart attack. And she just like lists the headlines from there, and I understand that. And it's very difficult, and that's how she connects. And it's very difficult for me to then say, well, you really should, get off Facebook because you're actually the product they're buying and selling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insensitive in a way. So, what do you do?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm not on Facebook, but I think part of the reason I'm allowed to not be on Facebook is a reflection of privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And and I understand that it's a luxury not to be. And there are healthy ways. If you
Isn't that interesting what you just said, though?
Yeah.
It's a luxury to not be on Facebook. It's a luxury to not check my email, 500 times a day. I mean, it's flipped. Remember, it used to be this like, well, we're afraid that the have-nots, they're not going to have access to the digital technology. But yet in my kid's school, everything is Google Classroom this and iPad that.
Yeah. Although before I even had email in the late 80s, I came because I was starting my Siberia book.
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed with this guy, Siberia, Cyberia, Cyber, yeah. And I was staying with a guy in Berkeley
Mm-hmm.
who had he was on Usenet or something, some really early thing. And we'd be talking or get stoned or whatever, and then he'd be like, I have to go now. And then he would spend, from 8 till 2 in the morning on the thing. And I was like, well, that's kind of, and that was at the very beginning. I mean, before I even had it. And I thought, wow, I mean, Etsy is on there a lot. Something's weird's going on here. So yeah, in terms of how to use it properly, or I guess it's sort of what's being asked. What's the appropriate?
Yeah. Well, what do you do when there are these affordances and value for various people and groups and
Right.
that
I
Facebook
guess
provides?
all you have to do is realize that every technology you use is a drug. It is a
That's
drug.
why we're the users.
Right, we're the users. So now, but you consciously say, okay, I'm going to go on Facebook. I'm going to be on Twitter, right? I'm going to be on Netflix. If you ever go to a monastery, there'll be monks there who aren't even speaking, right? They'll take a week off from speaking or a month off from speaking. That's not about ego. That's what we always think, oh, look at them. They've got such, they're going to calm their ego and not express. No, it's because they understand that even the English language is a drug. Right. They're going to be off English. It's software. Right, so when your brain is not on English, all of a sudden subjects, objects go away, all of the biases of the English language go away, or whatever language you have go away, and you can start to behold reality unencumbered by this politicized system of words. And that's part of what Cut and Paste was about too, was seeing the politics of language and how language developed. So it's fine to use Facebook, but when you understand when you're using a drug, usually you're using it because you're compensating for some problem, right? I'm taking Motrin because I'm really using the computer too much and it's hurting my neck. I'm taking Valium because I had the wrong job. I'm taking Prozac because whatever, because I don't have enough eye contact, so there's not enough oxytocin going through my bloodstream, and I need to adapt to that. And not that that's a problem, but again, as our dear friend Timothy Leary used to say, before you decide to take a drug, look into the eyes of someone who's on that drug and decide if that's somewhere you want to be.
Doug, since you brought up Tim, who was, as you probably guessed, our friend and an inspiration and a mentor to us both independently, in fact, you quoted Tim on the back of the book. There's a question of Tim would say, you got to turn on. What do you do after you turn on? And he said, you find the others, which is a phrase that means a lot to me. The first time I interviewed Tim Leary, I asked him, do you have any advice for the young people of today, which meant me at the time? And he said, think for yourself and question authority. What's your advice for young people of the day?
Yeah, maybe, maybe not. I mean, I don't think that's the. No, I would say, I mean, find the others is the primary one, and I don't just mean find the other people who already get it. I mean find the others. Find the others. Find the scary Trump person. You know, it's not. I'm not saying agree with their ideas or anything. Find the human under there. Find the fear that's motivating that. If you can't see the scary Trump person as a human, how do you expect him to see a Mexican as a human? Right? They are humans. You know, they're not totally gone. I'm not saying embrace Hitler or something. I mean, there's people. There's not. They're afraid. They're afraid of something. They're under tremendous pressure, and they're dealing with the dissolution of nationalist myths and so much stuff that has been their belief. But yeah, and I would say join the conspiracy. Join the conspiracy. To conspire literally means to breathe together. Breathe together with another person, and you're actually part of the conspiracy. Every moment that you spend just breathing with another person is a moment you're not buying, you're not selling, you're not tweeting, you're not producing. You're an enemy of the state, an enemy of the market, an enemy of technology, and you are a human. You're a friend of the humans. So yeah, really try to learn to establish rapport with other people. Look into other people's eyes as much as you can tolerate. You know, it's so good. It initiates the whole thing. You know, I've been teaching 5 years now at CUNY in New York. Every single year, more kids come up on the first day of class with a note that says, from their doctor, that says, this student should be excused from having to give class presentations and having to participate directly in a seminar. And that's because they have social anxiety. But more, I mean, I understand there's, you know, they're allowed, but why is that? And it's because it hasn't been anchored in kindergarten, in nursery school, in grade school, where it's giving them, not that the technology's bad. It's not just that we're giving them iPads, but we've communicated to them that the purpose of the classroom is to become more, a better utility, right? They are the objects in the class, not the pupils, not, you know, the classroom is what it can be is an experience of mimesis. That you are there's a teacher who is embodying learning. It's a higher value. It's what Horkheimer would call a capital R reason rather than a small r reason. It's like a essential human value of learning, you know, and you do that. So yeah, but my main advice is hey, bye. Oh, you're coming around? Okay. I know him. Even if I didn't, he's sweet. He looks sweet. But yeah, it's look at people. You know, learn to establish rapport. You know, look into people's eyes and start to notice all of the micro motions that allow rapport to happen, and feel that oxytocin. And don't look for it on in mediated spaces, because you're not going to get it. And then you're not going to blame the technology for that. You're going to blame the other person.
Find the others. Team Human. Doug Rushkoff at the Commonwealth Club. Thanks so much, buddy.
See? You did good.